Hello everyone. So today I will speak to you about how not to use Kubernetes. There is a very special day every year which is called the Black Friday, where internet goes on sales. And at Algolia we are powering a lot of e-commerce platform, and so our number of requests are like completely skyrocketing. If you are working in the e-commerce business, you probably heard of this day and you know that it's a very, very special day. A lot of things can happen because the number of requests and number of users to our website are completely going crazy. And on last year, we had an outage of around 45 minutes on the Algolia dashboard. So it's the connected part of the www.algolia.com. So what happened? On this nice graph, it's a New Relic. You can see during the outage what exactly was happening. In fact, all the requests were taking up to 60 seconds, so they were eating a lot of timeouts. And most of it was due to a request in MySQL. But where was it coming from? Was it the dashboard? As it's Black Friday, you know, we expected a lot of customers to use the dashboard. No. In fact, it was coming from another service calling an internal API of our dashboard. And that was this one. So this is an internal endpoint. What it does is not very important, but basically here what we see, it's a classical example of cascading failure. We have another system that was overloaded because, you know, Black Friday, that managed to kill our dashboard. So what happened exactly? In fact, we had one external service, a new one that was in beta at the time, that was like bombarding our dashboard. Instead of doing one call every 5 minutes, it was doing multiple calls every second. But how do you do that? So basically, you have a cron job that runs every 5 minutes, so a task running every 5 minutes that was doing one API call. So how do you transform a cron job from 5 minutes into a DDoS system? So that's what I'm going to present you. I'm Rémi Christophe, I'm working at Algolia, and I will present you how to transform a cron job into a DDoS system. So you will see it's a very, very complex thing. So first, you use Kubernetes. Thank you. I'm joking. So first, before to understand how we managed to do that, let's talk about the architecture of one of our new products, which is called personalization. Basically, personalization is 3 different services. The first, it's called the Insight API, where we receive user events. Then in the middle, we've got the personalization engine that takes those user events, processes them, and then transfer them to the search API. So every time you search on our search API, you've got personalized search. So let's deep dive a bit. So on the central part, so the Perso engine, we have basically 2 things. We have a queue where we have things to build, jobs to build, and workers that take one job from the queue and build something and send it back to the API. And you know, we are running on Kubernetes, we like Kubernetes, and we are like, okay, so basically we are running tasks in a worker. But the job of Kubernetes is to run jobs, pun intended. And so maybe we could leverage Kubernetes to run those tasks directly inside Kubernetes. Instead of relying on workers, we could say, okay, Kubernetes, here a job, schedule it, do something, restart if it fails, and maybe it will work. As we were in beta, it was kind of okay. We are trying new architecture and new way of doing things. So basically what we did was very simple. Instead to have a worker that was taking the task from the job queue, we had, like we call a builder that was taking a job, asking the Kubernetes API, please schedule this job somewhere, and it was running smoothly. Kubernetes was doing its job, running jobs. Obviously, we didn't try to change it the first day. We try both of it in parallel for a few days to see how it works. And in fact, we are very happy because the full pipeline was working pretty well. We were using Kubernetes way better in terms of resources than with the worker pattern. And so we said, okay, let's continue with architecture and delete the old one and just use this new one. Cool, it was working. Just to give you a bit of idea, for 1,000 user events we receive, it resulted in one task, so one job in Kubernetes. Just to give you a rough idea. And one morning, we arrived at work and we received this nice email. Dear Algolia, we would like to send 160 million user event in a few minutes the day before Black Friday from our dear anonymous client. Obviously, this didn't happen, but we didn't receive the email, but we did receive the 160 million user events in around 10-20 minutes. You remember the one task equal 1,000 user event? Me too. This command basically is able to get us the number of jobs currently running in Kubernetes. So at one point, we had like 150,000 jobs running in parallel in Kubernetes. So that was okay. So before trying to understand how it could happen and how we managed to get to this point, let's go a bit into how Kubernetes works. You had two good presentations before, so I won't go into much details. But basically, you've got the Kubernetes master, the nodes where your code is running. Inside the master, you've got the API server, the scheduler, the controller, etcd. But the thing is interesting here is that we are on GKE. So in fact, as I said before, the masters are managed by Google. We are happy to let them manage them. But the thing is that they are a black box. We don't know what's happening inside, and we don't want to know what's happening inside. But the thing, we are like, okay, we have a cluster that is doing weird things. It's doing like with the cron job DDoSing our dashboard. So what could we do? What's happening? So let's try to understand what was happening inside our cluster. No. So this command basically is able to give you the resource usage of all the nodes of your cluster. And as you can see, basically, Kubernetes was said, no, I don't know, I won't answer you. You might expect this was extremely very not good. So how could it happen? Our hypothesis, because that's only hypothesis, we never could understand what really happened inside Kubernetes. What's that? Is that in the horizontal, you've got the time, and in the vertical, you've got the jobs that are currently running inside Kubernetes. So at the beginning, you have some jobs running. It worked. Then at T+1, we had one job that finished, and then we are more job unqueued, and so on, and so on. And then basically, all the cron jobs were scheduled exactly at the same time. And that's how you transform a 5-minute cron job into a cron job running every second, basically. Because in fact, it happened for a lot of days, and all the scheduling of the crons were launched at the same time. So instead of running one cron every 5 minutes, we have the same cron running every second. So how could this happen? We make some bad assumptions. The first one is an easy one, is that starting a job in Kubernetes is fast. What we measured was the time from an event coming inside our pipeline to the time it goes out. And in fact, in average, it worked pretty well, and it was the same time as with the normal worker pattern. But the thing that we forgot was to measure on each and individual step. And what happened is that our jobs were taking around 100 milliseconds to run, so the actual code. But in fact, the init of the job, the close of the pod and so on was taking more than 5 seconds. So we had like a huge overhead where we had a CPU running just to start our job instead of doing the actual work that we wanted. The second is that we could process jobs faster than the incoming events. In all our tests, it was the case. So in fact, it worked very well. We had a lot of jobs running in parallel in Kubernetes, like 100, but as they were killed and start at the regular pace, so it was working. Here, as we had a huge spike of number of jobs running, we had too many at the same time, and Kubernetes was like, eh. Lastly, customer warn you before using a beta feature a lot. Thanks, customer. If you have to remember one thing from this presentation, would be this, so please listen carefully, then we'll have food, don't worry. I think that's a very nice way to see how you can see the limits of a system. So just let's see that. In horizontal axis, you have the number of indices. So it's a system that could have indices, and it has a limit, because all systems have limits. In the vertical, you have the number of objects with a certain limit. And where is the real actual limit of your system? So you can probably think that it's the sum of both limits. Probably not. Most of the time, the systems are designed to work either very well with a lot of, for example, indices in this case, or number of edges, but not both. The limit is probably not on this line either, because as I said, the system was not tested in average, but in the maximum on each feature and not on the average of all feature. And the real actual limit of your system was probably more on this nice curve. So when you have two features to see the limit of your system, it's easy. You can graph it, I can display it on a TV. But when you have 100 million features like Kubernetes, seeing the real limit of the system is very hard. And that we did. We know that you can run a lot of things in Kubernetes in parallel, but you cannot start a lot of things at the same time. And that was one of our bad assumptions. Some last takeaways. First, ask feedback from your providers. In this case, we got our phone, we asked Google, hey, can you help us? And they were very quick to come, and they explained a lot of things. They know Kubernetes more than we can do, that we can know. And so when you have a system that is maintained by someone else, ask them. They will probably know better than you. The second is always put limits. Our system, our design could work, but we forgot to put limits. And that's how we managed to schedule hundreds of thousands of jobs. If we had put like some rate limits or some limits on the number of jobs we started at the same time, it would have handled the load and it could have probably perfectly worked. Another, always test your assumptions. As I said, we made an assumption on the start time of the job, of the capacity of Kubernetes to handle both its limits at the same time. It was assumption and it failed badly. And the last, A/B test and load test, easy. As I mentioned, we A/B test our architecture. I think that was a very good decision, but we didn't go far enough into this A/B test because we measured the full thing, but not all the small steps, and that was what was the issue in our case. And lastly, please use Kubernetes, but properly. Thank you.
Any question?
You're hungry?
The question was, A/B test is unit testing?
It could be here. It's A/B testing your full. In our case, it was a full architecture, but you can do at the scale you want. It's just to have an idea of running two things in parallel and see how each thing is behaving correctly or not.
How did you fix the issue? Just waiting?
We destroyed the cluster and we created a new one.
Eventually, how did you manage the queue issues and the limits on this problem?
We went back to the previous architecture with a simple queue and multiple workers.
All right. No more question? Cool. So food and drinks now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, RCS.